have a very active Phi Kappa Phi chapter here at this institution. And I'd like to recognize anybody in the audience who is a faculty, staff, or student member of the organization. If you already stand, please. Thank you for being here tonight. This event is one of my favorite events of the spring semester. It gives us a chance to hear from some of our colleagues, particularly in our college, the College of Humanities and Fine Arts. We don't often get to do that, to hear what our colleagues are doing. We're all doing interesting work, and it's nice to be able to have a chance to hear people talk about their scholarly work. I need to give you a brief introduction to the woman for whom this lecture has been named, and then I'll introduce our speakers. Muriel Thomlinson, for which this lecture has been named, came to UTM in 1959 after receiving her PhD in Romance languages from Duke University. She taught French and Spanish in the English department at the time, and then served as the founding chairperson of the Department of Modern Foreign Languages until she retired in 1976. Under her leadership, the department grew from 2 to 6 faculty members and offered majors in French and Spanish, as well as minors in French, Spanish, and German. Professor Thomlinson was also a pioneer of instructional methodology in the classroom, developing the first language laboratory on campus, something with which some of you may have had some experience. Professor Thomlinson is a shining exemplar of the Phi Kappa Phi motto, let the love of learning rule humanity. Tonight, we honor her legacy here on campus by bringing you a speaker from the College of Humanities and Fine Arts, Mr. Jason Stout, Associate Professor of Art. He received his BFA in Studio Art from UTM in 2001 and an MFA, a Master's of Fine Arts in Painting from the University of Texas at San Antonio in 2004. His work exists in several private and public collections, including the University of West Georgia, Jacksonville State University, and the University of Tennessee at Martin. During the last 3 years, he has been a part of over 40 exhibitions, including 3 solo shows and 7 national exhibition catalogs. He was also named Tennessee Art Education Association Higher Education Art Educator of the Year, what a mouthful that is, for 2015 and 2016, and received a Best of Show Award for the Art of the South 2016 exhibition. He was a recipient of the 2017-2018 Bob and Wilma Smith Endowment, and his work, as you can see up here on the screen, deals with elements of formal and figurative abstraction, exploring themes like power, history, and identity, especially as manifest in Southern culture. I will add, this is not part of his official bio, he is also advisor to one of the largest and most active student organizations on campus, with what I'll bet is one of the most mispronounced names, the League of Striving Artists. And I'll bet they're well represented here. That's you guys, right? Mr. Stout's presentation tonight is called Painting and Picture Making in the Postmodern Age. Please welcome him to the stage.
I warn you, I speak with a stool. I'm a much better speaker with a stool. I guess it's part of the intro to the civic thing. And thank you for coming and missing the Trump address to hear me talk about painting. And I don't know if it'll be as huge as what's coming with what he's going to talk about, but it should at least be a couple degrees better than the Maroon 5 halftime show. Sorry, there's a Maroon 5 fan in the audience. So Chris introduced my talk here, Painting and Picture Making in a Postmodern Age, and I'll preface this with, I'm going to have to touch over about 500 years of art history very quickly. So for any other colleagues and scholars that feel like I'm not doing due diligence with a certain period, you have to understand that there's a lot to go through, and they give me about 50 minutes. And so I do want to at least kind of create a backdrop to get to the painting and picture making that I'm doing now. And even though this probably doesn't look like anything that's tied to the medieval period, you're going to be able to see historically that everybody that makes painting and pictures now, all of this stuff is connected visually in one way or another. It just gets recontextualized with how the whole decisions are made with what's happening in this society or culture at the time. This is my introduction with who I am and what I do. I have a BFA in studio art from UTM and MFA from UTSA. I teach drawing 1, drawing 2, painting 1, painting 2, 2D design using color, and then special topics classes. And I make paintings and drawings and exhibit my work nationally, and my work is carried by galleries, RU Gallery in San Antonio, Texas, and Circuitous Succession Gallery in Memphis. So I teach art, and I'm making art, and I create art, and then I work with my student art group to try to create art within our society and culture, especially in West Tennessee. And that's just as important as any of the other things that I do. I'm going to start with medieval art around 500 AD to 1550 AD. This is really where we get into picture making. And when I talk about picture making, I'm talking about when we start getting off the walls and we start getting into more of a rectangular kind of square canvas kind of situation where it's not tied to a cathedral or a building or anything else like that. Painting as it becomes a little bit more portable. During this period, most of your medieval art is flat and formal with little bit of rendering. Sex is usually hard to determine with the characters. The backgrounds are usually flat color or ornate. You'll see a lot of goldness work. There's no use of sign or perspective really until the end of the period, so most of what we're dealing with is flat space and flat characters existing over the top of this background. It's religious with little emphasis on human nature or humans outside of their relationship to God. The figures are almost always clothed, which is very common, at least my son here, so I don't see that. And it is developed shortly after the invention of the printing press. And one of the things that I'm going to touch on as I move through this is that technology really affects the evolution of picture making as we go along. And I'll kind of define what painting and picture making is in a little bit, but the printing press is really important because part of things going into print, going into book form, the world starts to really see and digest information material in a very kind of square rectangular format. And it's not a coincidence that most of the paintings we see historically moving out of this period are also kind of tied to that format as well. The first kind of image that we'll look at here, this is Duccio's Madonna and Child. This is comparing gold on wood from 1284. You can see all the characteristics of the medieval period that I talked about here. One of the great things about medieval art is that there's always some kind of a child, which is supposed to be a Christ-like figure that always looks like an ill-proportioned 40-year-old man sitting on the top of his lap. And even though this is due to a lack a little bit of draftsmanship and a real kind of fluid attention in nature, they really make for more interesting pictures than I think as the ones in the Renaissance. We'll do one more of these. Madonna and Child was a very important theme. This is a Sevis Virgin and Child before saints, and this is a detail shot. And you can see how similar the picture constructs are, and it's usually flat figures with little to no rendering. At this point, oil paint hadn't been invented yet, so when you're talking about tempera paint on wood, you're really talking about a loose kind of mixture of a paint that doesn't really glaze well. So what you have is a lot of stumbling and trying to move a light value into a dark value, trying to do things with a brush. But it's not until oil painting where they're able to really develop processes that can build dimension and form. This gets us into the next period, which is the Renaissance, which follows exactly after that. You have mastery and use of linear perspective. One of the things that I'll touch on that takes us a long time as picture makers to get out of is the fact that once we discover and we really start paying attention to Renaissance depth, we don't really get out of Renaissance depth until around the late 1800s or the 1900s. The people start experimenting with pictures to do other things. So the amount of attention to linear perspective and real depth that exists in the Renaissance will dominate picture making for a long time. The form and rendering here, rendering the form is perfected. That just means things start to look realistic like they look in real life. The symmetry and depth in pictures was always a primary focus. Anatomy and the correct representation of nature and human beings, which means people actually look like people look, so you can start to see correct children in a second. And also, too, there's a little bit more of an emphasis on humanism. It becomes a shared interest conceptually along with religion. As information starts to spread as part of what the Gutenberg printing press does, is that people eventually become smarter. There's more information that's easily spread around, and so it's not as controlled as it was previous to that period. It harkens back to Greek classicism and architecture. A lot of what you're going to see in the Greek art from that time is very, very sculptural and less pictorial. And what you get in the Renaissance is really the first kind of like vestige of like pictorial art that focuses on the representational nature of what existed in Greek art. In this period too, we start to get oil paint as a medium. It was invented around 1410. And part of what we see with oil paint is that it brought techniques such as underpainting and glazing, which made paintings more lifelike and realistic, which means you can do an underpainting as a value painting with light and dark value and slowly start to glaze layer and layer and layer of thin transparent paint. Oil paint is essentially pigment just trapped in a more body that then rests and hardens and it creates a film. And the more transparent or thin down that it is, the layering of the skin starts to become more and more luminous as you layer over an underpainting. The first two that we'll look at here is a comparison of the Sansetta from earlier and the Cima di Pinigliano's Virgin and Child. It's an oil painting on wood. I'm going to show the oil painting here from 1500. And you can see already two distinct differences here. The amount of rendering that happens with the invention of oil paint with the painting on the left is night and day with the amount of form that's able to be developed. You can also see more of an attention to what exists in the real world. So instead of being on a gold background or promise with this ornateness, which is the heavenly and the kind of heaven and the kind of this mind state, what you have now in this picture is a virgin and child that's actually in front of a place that exists that you can go see or visit. It exists in the real world. Part of what we notice here too that starts to build very, very simple depth, and the great thing about all the Renaissance stuff that exists is it doesn't take a lot of stuff to really get a picture very deep. One, in the back here, is that we see, let's see, well, you can kind of see it behind her to the left and right as we see a horizon line that separates the sky from the ground. And just by doing that, you're already falling into a sense of illusionary depth. So when you have round figures that look like the people you see and encounter every day, and they're existing in a world that has depth, you're getting close to what a true kind of human experience is. This is Raphael's School of Athens. It's a fresco from 1509 to 1511. This really shows off all the great kind of pictorial tricks that happen in Renaissance depth that makes this depth more representational. We have decrease in relative scale, which means figures that are closer to us in the foreground and the middle ground are actually large. As figures move away from us spatially, they start to get smaller. We have multiple points of perspective, but really 1, 2, and 3 point perspective. As we move back to the horizon line, and these colonnades that exist in the middle start to also decrease in relative scale as we move back, which means you're able to fall into the picture and then also get pushed out by figures that exist in the foreground because this is a very large painting and these figures are almost life size. This gets us into the Baroque period. In the Baroque period, we have a strong kind of sense of the use of motion and movement. So now as artists start to kind of learn about how to paint a representational picture of the real world, and they start to get good with oil paint and start to master this kind of stuff, they're wanting the figures to do more stuff. The thing about painting, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later on, is that paintings are static images, which means they're very still and they don't move. So once the kind of modeling was figured out in the early Renaissance period, with the poses and the posture and the figures all in this pose, the next thing was how can we get static figures in a static image to seem like they're moving? And this will be something that artists, and especially painters, deal with for quite a while until we get to around abstraction in the early 1900s. Also here we have thick use of paint while developing elements of chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro is really just extreme for light and dark lighting. So it's not only do we still have form that we had in the early part of the Renaissance, but we're starting to get this really light and dark dramatic mood that is set to these pictures by really dealing with value in a very dramatic way. So the scenes that are going on and the things that are going on in the pictures become a little bit more dramatic. This, for me personally, deals with the way in which I think about color saturation. So chiaroscuro and color saturation are not the same things, but the same kind of sensation you get when you look at a picture that has extreme chiaroscuro and when you look at a picture that has bright color saturation and extreme light dark situation are very, very similar. So the first one I have is Caravaggio's Doubting Thomas. This oil on canvas from 1601 to 1602. Here we have Thomas kind of poking and prodding the room and cries with other disciples looking on. You can see in the picture most of the paintings in this period that use chiaroscuro have a very, very kind of dark background, thicker, rich, developed colors. You know, it's not just that oil paint is around now, people are getting better at it. It's that the really good painters that exist in this period are also the people that are the best paint makers. They've really kind of learned how to work with pigments, where to extract the best pigments from, and Caravaggio is definitely one of these folks. If you know anything about Caravaggio too, is this painting is speaking about a lot more than just religion. Artists during this time of picture making, they used certain genres, especially religious paintings, which were afforded by the patrons who were kind of paying for these paintings. But they also almost always had a way to sneak a little bit of their life experience or culture into the picture. I like to compare this painting with Rembrandt's Anatomy Lesson. A very similar kind of painting, except for, you'll notice as the skills kind of develop more, also the focus on human endeavors start to evolve as well. So in the Anatomy Lesson, we're still dealing with a figure that has had some kind of wound where you're being prodded open and kind of being able to witness externally, but one is speaking on lessons that are tied to biblical things and spirituality, and the other one is really tied to human anatomy, what happens to the figure when it's dead outside of a religious context. And these are really neat paintings because they're only made 30 years apart. What makes this so great too is it's not like these artists had direct connections to each other when seeing their work. They're all kind of making these great advances in what they're doing pictorially at the same time. It's not like Rembrandt couldn't get on Instagram and send Caravaggio the anatomy. It's just, this is kind of co-happening. This will kind of move us up to Rococo art. What I like about this period is it's very ornamental and decorative. Expanded on the theatricality of the Baroque period, so the picture making that we had before, if we started to get in movement with the figures, now we are starting to get on the edge of soap opera, almost, especially with a lot of Fragonard paintings. Formally use extreme curves and counter curves to push the dramatic qualities of the scene. So every time an artist learns something, the next generation of artists behind them are kind of like picking this up and adding this to the picture. And so what you have here is a loose start of modernity, which is somebody comes up with something and the next person kind of absorbs that and then they build onto it by either reacting for or against it. And this is going to go along, pretty much till we get to the late 1960s. Often included gilded or ornamental decorative wood elements around the work, focusing on pattern and decorative design. So we start to get back to some of the gold. The gold painting is a really tacky thing I've never really agreed with, and it usually gets killed off for about 100 to 200 years and then it always comes back. I didn't make my Trump joke. If you've ever seen any of the Trump towers, you know what I mean. It's back now. I'll go into Fragonard's picture here, the swing, which is, this is a very popular picture, and a lot of the pictures I'm going to focus on because we have more of a broad kind of general audience, I did want to talk about pictures that I thought people would be a little bit more familiar with. But even though this painting is made in 1767 and the work that I make is very different from this, this has always been one of the most exciting pictures for me, just because of how theatrical it is, how fun it is. The amount of decoration and floral elements to the picture, it becomes very, very decorative. To lower parts of what you're seeing is bushes and trees and the negative space. Now they move in and out of the light of the picture. Actually, there's great moments of textural abstraction where if you really look at the picture long enough and you get through the image part, there are beautiful moments of eerie abstraction that exist naturally in a very kind of naturally depicted picture. And outside of the fun kind of fantasy part of there's a lady in swings, pushed from behind, there's another shooter, just casually kicking the shoe off that one. It has everything that a daytime soap opera has with all the lusciousness and beautiful paint that Fragonard brings to the table. This is also, this is a detail of Marie Antoinette's bedroom. Most of the great painting from this period happens in France. You'll notice that most of the painting historically, which really gets talked about, is usually following some kind of level of patronage or money. So where the money's at, the art usually follows, because artists, they need sponsors and they need patrons and they need people that are really going to pay for the artist to live, to be able to take these experimental leaps and get into this. Marie Antoinette's bedroom is a complete example of utter excess and obnoxiousness, but the decorative elements and the patterns in this, outside of the context, and if you can get past how class-driven it is, and then obviously Marie Antoinette's one people know we have a lot of money. It's a very kind of beautiful formal arrangement of pattern and decoration. And there's a grand design to all this outside of the gold and everything else, which makes it a luscious picture. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about, this is 1735 to 1784. And I'm going to move, boom, this is one of these people where I'm going to ask fellow academics to excuse me a little bit, but I'm going to jump right to 1888. Because in the next couple of periods that happen after Rococo, what we really get is neoclassical painting, and we get Academy painting, and And what we have is the big schools that dominate painting during this picture are really just kind of recycling all the things that have existed before, but just doing new tricks. So your neoclassical painting just means new classicism. So they're visiting things from the Renaissance and things like that, recycling all this. And the Academy painting was kind of the same thing. They had historical genre types, such as landscape, figurative, or still life, and they're just recycling these things over and over. And painting would have probably went on doing the same thing over and over and over until it had to evolve and become something else. The Eastman Kodak camera was invented in 1888. It was the first kind of portable camera that people could actually buy and afford to purchase. Before that, we have some of the earliest photography existing in France in like the late 1830s, but it's not common use. It's not like everybody could afford to get a camera, they could use it, or even understood what exactly they did. But by 1888, when this portable camera becomes available for people to own, painting has to do something else, because painting, in all its great forms and its innovations and its beautiful human qualities, could not represent the world in the exact same exactness that a camera can. So the painters are starting to become aware of this, and they're starting to take painting and picture making into something else. Now, I define this, for me, with my talk, with what I'm going to be discussing, as the loose start of the modernist period. Now, all of these kind of periods can be shifted and moved 30 to 50 years forward or back, depending on who you're talking to. But for me, the Kodak camera, and then when we get around the turn of the century, with cinema, these are two things that really affect how pictures are going to be made. In the modernist period, we have classical themes and ideas challenged and recontextualized. We have non-linear time sequence and ideas explored, which means people are able to play with narrative in a way in which it can exist in one state of the story and then in another coexisting in the same picture. We have primitivism and non-Western art influences in development, which means outside of the European canon, we're starting to see other artwork from other cultures that at the time, maybe correctly and responsibly, is being taken from that culture, but the artists that are seeing this work are responding to formal qualities, and it's opening up possibilities that they never thought. This is great because this kind of all happened at the same time when it needed to happen. Sexuality is explored more as a subject. People get in touch with touching. And the narration and authorship comes from multiple perspectives, which means we're not seeing the same viewpoint of the world, usually done by an artist, but really through the eyes of the wealthy patron. We're starting to see artists take more risk and kind of put the perspective in. I jump past Impressionism. So if you're a fan of mall kiosk and Impressionist calendars, there's nothing wrong with Impressionism. The only thing with Impressionism is really a focus on color, and the real advances that exist in Impressionism for me have always been about color. They come out of Turner and English painting that existed before that. But as far as evolving what picture making can do, we really have to look at the post-Impressionist movement when we do any of the Impressionists. During this period, they utilized and extended vibrant palettes of the Impressionists. They use subject matter rooted in real life with fewer excursions into fantasy or myth, which means they're not using stories that previously existed. They're starting to use life narratives and things that happen either in their lives or lives in the cultural society around them as subject matter for art. They experiment more with flat areas and distorting form and geometry, as well as paint layer application of brushstroke effects, which means they're not as worried about making paintings and pictures that have to deal only with the responsibility of representing where they're at. They would also use a natural color or arbitrary color for the sake of the painting rather than an application to picture making, or to depiction of nature. This is a painting